So a couple days ago, a friend of mine had he actually forwarded me some voice messages between him and his ex-wife on WhatsApp. And I went ahead and listened to all of them. He had sent her a very genuine, very heartfelt 5-minute message, not anything in terms of wanting to get back together. He knows how toxic she is. But essentially saying that they need to put whatever disagreements they have aside and do what is best for their son. They have a kid together. And he was explaining to her that the son is as much a part of her as he is a part of him. He's very, like I said, very calm, very calculated, very logical in the voice message. And she responds saying how he's toxic. She literally said in the voice messages, I'm not listening to the whole 5 minutes. You probably listened to the first 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Telling him how he's toxic, how he hates her, how she can see the resentment in his eyes, just narcissistic gaslighting. Now, where this connects into the video is this woman is actually a school teacher in elementary school. And last time I checked, I believe something like 89% of teachers in elementary are women. But where they had a big kind of disagreement and split was over their son who was born what she, I guess, calls defected, because he has a learning disability. Does this sound like a woman who you would want raising your kid, especially if you have a son? She doesn't even really have love for her own son. You should have his best interest. It doesn't matter if he has a learning disability, which I'll touch on that as well, what's considered defective. You should have the best interest of your son. If you don't, how are you going to have the best interest and want success for sons of other people, for young boys? You are not the kind of person that should be in a position like that. And that is the problem. You have a lot of young men, you have a lot of kids being raised by women who hate them. This video was actually inspired by a video by Dad Mode, who's got some awesome content. He put out this video a number of months ago talking about really the possibility of men being raised by women who hate them and how detrimental it is, how a lot of men don't know how to manage things like anger, don't know how to control certain things, don't even know how to behave and act like a man. And with this situation, with my friend's ex-wife being a school teacher, they have split custody 50-50 of the son. Yet my friend is paying child support even though they have split custody because he makes more money, by the way, which, not to get too personal into his financial situation, but he's not someone that you would consider financially abundant. He has his struggles as well. Yet he is paying the child support. She doesn't put a penny in it. That to me doesn't make any sense. That's absolutely ridiculous. The only instance where someone should be paying child support, where a man should be paying child support, is if perhaps, I'm talking about someone who's actually a deadbeat, not fake allegations so the mother could take the kid away like I've seen in many cases. Cases where the father is actually being neglectful. Those are the circumstances where a man should be paying child support. Not if he has split custody of the kid and she still works a job and he's caring for the child, feeding the child, buying clothes for the child, spending time with the child. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But when the son was born, from what he told me, once he was kind of diagnosed with this learning disability, she became like a completely different person. And she was blaming the father for the kid being that way, which, by the way, it's as much her son. He's as much her son as he is my friend's son. Yet she's putting all the blame on him, which I want to talk about that because this whole thing with defected, learning disability, I've known people who took special needs classes and stuff like that. They were some of the most intelligent and talented people that I've ever met. They could be very hyper-focused on things. Even when I went to college, a lot of people in my department might be considered socially awkward, stuff like that, but they were very dialed in, very intelligent. My thing is this, a lot of people who they might say are socially awkward or stuff like that, or not as sociable. A lot of the times they see a lot of people for who they are. They see the fakeness. They see that a lot of people are fake. It's like, socialized for what? To be gossiped about? To be slandered, to have people trying to compete with you over bottom of the barrel women? And by the way, when I say bottom of the barrel, I'm not even talking about looks. I'm talking about in terms of personality, quite frankly, lack of personality, lack of morals, like in this situation. There's a big misunderstanding of that. But to get on with my point, These are the so-called educators that a lot of young boys are growing up with. And it's extremely damaging. That's why you have a lot of men who don't know how to act masculine. They don't. They go through adulthood, and that's what they were raised by. In many cases, they might have not even had their father in their life, like I've talked about in previous videos, the divorce rate, the single motherhood rate. Even one of my childhood best friends, who I haven't talked to in about 7 years, he was raised in a single mother household, and we had a disagreement over something. So he was dating a girl at the time. This was around 7 years ago, like I mentioned. And it was on the 4th of July, I remember. And she was a little bit buzzed. She was drinking. And he was walking in front of us, and she was kind of walking next to me and started kind of putting her hands on me, rubbing my arm and stuff like that. Back then I was into the gym. Excuse me. Back then I was into the gym. But that's besides the point. And I had actually told my friend about this, which was the right thing to do. Yes, it might be a hard conversation to have. Yes, it might be embarrassing, whatever you want to call it. But that was the right thing to do. And a couple days later, I get these very passive-aggressive texts from him going after me saying how I'm obsessed with the gym and this kind of stuff. And my thing is this. I'm like, dude, I don't even understand what the issue is. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to say that you should break up with this girl. And I tried to call him. He didn't pick up the phone. I said, hey, man, like, let's just talk about it. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to keep going back and forth over text like a toxic girlfriend or something like that, like acting super emasculated. So I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm done. If we're not going to be able to have a conversation like an adult, I'm not doing this, because I'm the kind of person where, as any adult really, as any man, I'm not going to go back and forth with people over text. If we have a disagreement, let's either meet in person or just talk over the phone, and we'll talk about whatever misunderstanding or disagreement there is. That's the best way to deal with things. But my point being is, this was a man who was raised by women, who went to the public schools. He did not know how to handle business or act like a man. Act like a man. With this kind of drama over the phone. Another thing I want to touch on too with the gym stuff, because he had mentioned the gym and my obsession. Back then, I've talked about this in a previous video. I remember I made a video. It was called "Looks Maxing Nearly Ruined My Life." And I did things to my body that I quite frankly shouldn't have. You guys are probably, certain things might be coming to your imagination. I did things that I shouldn't have done to my body within that kind of gym culture space. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. Perhaps the biggest mistake I've ever made. But I'm not saying you have to be Mr. Bodybuilder and go to the gym and track all your meals. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that I know men personally who are in their 20s who can't even do a push-up. I've known men who can't even do a bodyweight squat that are physically abled people, physically abled men in their 20s. Guys, that's a problem. You don't even have to go to the gym to work out. But you should at the very least be able to do a bodyweight push-up, do a bodyweight squat. If God forbid something happens to your friend or family or something like that, and you need to be there to have their back, how are you going to be able to have their back or be able to really, what's it called? I don't want to say fight, because I think street fighting is just stupid. By the way, it's very foolish. It's better to avoid those kind of things. But, if something goes down, how are you going to be able to help them if you can't even do a bodyweight push-up? Like, I've seen a lot of times where when I would go out with friends, I see a lot of men, and these are, by the way, young guys in their 20s and 30s, who are just sitting there. They're eating absolute junk. They're drinking. They're watching the athletes on the TV who actually take fitness perhaps seriously. And we need to do better at that. But again, this is the damage that has been done, where a lot of men, they don't care anymore. They have given up. A lot of young men have given up. They're done, quite frankly. And again, I blame a lot of it, quite frankly, most of it, on their upbringing. They were probably raised by women who hated men. They were probably in school where, again, the women hated men. Like, I'm around the age of 30. And when I was in school, geez, this kind of stuff they were pushing, it was just insane. I like to think that was the highlight of it. Again, I graduated, around a decade ago, more than a decade ago, actually. And I've heard some people say it's gotten worse. I can't even imagine what they mean by that. I mean, that sounds quite frankly unbearable. But this is the damage that's being done. These are the women that are raising our kids a lot of the time. Like I mentioned, with elementary school, 89% of teachers being female. And in many cases, like I said, with my friend's ex-wife, these are the so-called educators that we have nowadays. So, another thing I want to touch on too, because I've heard this mentioned not only in comments, but probably in a different video I heard this mentioned, but about how looking at action heroes from the 80s and 90s and looking at the ones now. And my thing is this: it's not even just that they were more muscular or maybe appeared physically more masculine, but it's, if you look at it really, they were more calculated. They were not so emotionally unstable. They didn't do things just for women. They didn't do things for some kind of validation or approval. They did things because they had purpose. It was the right thing to do. And that's really masculinity, having self-control. There's been a big problem now with this kind of feminization, where a lot of men think approval and validation from other people is what you should focus on. It's not. Like, I've seen a lot of men, people I know personally, who they'll post nonstop on social media. Now, unless you're trying to build a business or a brand for yourself or something, or maybe you post every now and then. Like, I personally, I haven't posted on Instagram, and I think, 4 or 5 years, I haven't posted a single thing on there. And I see people posting 10, 20 different reels a day, doing it for people's attention and validation. That's not real confidence. That's not real masculinity. That's feminine behavior. You need attention and validation from other people. You're out chasing other people, even with the gym, not to get too off topic. When I used to go to gyms, I would see men following women around, just trying to get their attention, going there to not even work out, but going there to chase women, to get female attention. That's not masculine. That's not something that someone who is secure in themselves would do. Not at all. And even I've seen cases where people will throw their friends, so-called, under the bus just for female attention. That is absolutely pathetic. If you call yourself a man and do that, you're pathetic. I don't care what anyone says. Because you're a sellout. You're a complete sellout, and you don't know what real masculinity looks like. Real men don't backstab people. Real men don't betray people. They don't gossip about people when they're not in the room. That's not at all masculine. So again, that's the problem. Is that in a way it's ruined friendships. Because a lot of men now do not know how to act masculine. They don't. The passive-aggressive behavior, the feminine kind of mannerisms. And, even there was a situation where one of the last, which I'm in a kind of interesting kind of living circumstance now in terms of roommating and stuff like that. But one of the last places I roommated at, I had to get out of there because there was very feminine energy in the household. Like, even one of the people there, he would bring up things from the past, from months or years ago, and try to start arguments like a toxic girlfriend living in the past. You think you talk about something and you get over it. You don't sit there. And by the way, guys, with this video, I'm not trying to act like I'm better than anyone else, because I've been there. I grew up with a lot of resentment and anger, like I've talked about in previous videos. I wasn't close to my father growing up. I was very resentful towards my family. But again, I was brought up with the public system. I was brought up with the toxicity. I was brought up not knowing how to regulate my emotions, not knowing how to control anger, not knowing how to outlet those things, not knowing what a healthy friendship looks like. Those are the cards I was dealt. I had to figure it out the hard way. It took me until my mid-20s to start really finding even an ounce of confidence and real masculinity in myself. That's why I'm making this video, not just to try to act like I'm better. No, because I know exactly what it's like, because I have been there. Like with this roommate, I used to do the same thing. I would overthink because I did not even know how to engage. It's not even confrontation. Like I said with my friends with the girlfriend who I found out that he broke up with, thankfully, later on. But with that kind of stuff where it's like just even having a conversation as an adult, getting over things like a disagreement is not common now. It's just not. And that's even what I want to really come to my conclusion with this. Because there's this thing with the toxic masculinity stuff. Masculine men are not dangerous. They're not dangerous. That's the problem. They found a way to feminize a lot of men now. It's absolutely ridiculous. And men not knowing how to act masculine is what ruins a lot of friendships. Truthfully, it is. Like, even the problem is a lot of men, because like I've touched on the high single motherhood rate. Where do they look at for male guidance? A music video? Whatever's trending on social media? That's not real masculinity. There's hardly anything I've seen on either one of those outlets, whatever you want to call them, has resembled anything close to masculine. Real men are humble. They don't flaunt. They don't flex. They don't need to show off their jewelry or whatever material things they have. Real men are humble. They don't do that kind of stuff. And again, I'm not against, a man having a chain or a watch. I myself, I would call myself kind of a watch connoisseur. But it's feminine when you are doing things just for the attention of women or other people. That's not real confidence in yourself. I'm not saying don't wear deodorant and leave the house a mess and who cares. No, of course not. But you guys should know the difference. I know you guys obviously know the difference between what a real man is like, how a real man moves, how a real man handles himself, a real man's mentality versus a feminine man. They're two completely different things. Like I mentioned with the whole stuff, the stuff that people hear about with the action stars in the 80s. They were emotionally stable. They were calculated. They didn't get easily derailed by these kind of influences and stuff like that. They didn't. And even with my friend's ex-wife in the beginning, to also touch on this, not even just the upbringing, but to see so many good men emasculated. Geez, I need to make these videos earlier, but emasculated and beaten down by their wives or girlfriends is absolutely terrible. My friend even said that he's felt emasculated. It's affected him in other relationships throughout his life because of the way this woman treated him. That's absolutely insane. You should have the best interest of your son. Doesn't matter if he has some kind of learning disability. It doesn't matter. If anything, you need to be there as a parent so much more to make sure and ensure that he's able to do well. So, as always, guys, I appreciate you viewing the video, and I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.